Welcome back to another episode of Make It to Midnight. This is episode 17. I'm your host, JP Hovey. Thank you for being here. If this is your first time to Make It to Midnight, even bigger thank you to being here. Thanks to everybody that's been before. Thanks for everybody's first time. Thanks to everybody that's about to tell somebody about this show. I really appreciate it. But if you are new here, I suggest you go back, listen to last week's episode where I broke down the 5 most important things I learned in the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, one of the best books I've ever read. But that was last week. This week, we're talking about the importance of words, and it's the weight of your words and the well that you get your words from, which is ultimately your heart. And I want to start it off with our quote of the day. Every single episode, guys, we do a quote of the day to kick it off, and then usually I'll break down 1 or 2 people's stories that kind of relate to the quote of the day. Today, I'll be talking about Frederick Douglass, one of the most impressive men in American history. But the quote of the day is this, and it's from the movie Inception. If you haven't seen Inception, go check that out because that is an incredible movie. That's my door, you see, closet door. We got a mattress sticking out of it, so sometimes my door pokes out. But it's a work in progress, man. One day we'll be at the studio. We don't got to worry about the mattress in the storage closet. But quote of the day from Inception from Dom Cobb. From Dom Cobb, he says this: "What is the most resilient parasite? A bacteria, a virus, an intestinal worm? It's an idea, resilient, highly contagious. Once an idea has taken hold of the brain, it's almost impossible to eradicate." Love that quote. And what is an idea? That's our self-talk. The words are the most important thing in this world, and your self-talk is also the most important thing in this world because nobody talks to you more than you talk to you. Yes, other people's words do matter. Today I heard a lesson from somebody that was talking about the phrase, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." It's true in a certain context, but overall it's not true because a lot of times, if you're not carrying yourself in the right way and people's words are true about you, they will hurt you and they should hurt you. But your words can mean a lot to other people the same way other people's words mean a lot to you. So why is that important? It's important because it shows that every single person has the opportunity to impact somebody in a positive way or a negative way. And how you speak can be directly tied to the things that are in your heart. If you're a gossiper, if you're holding hatred, if you're holding jealousy, if you're holding any of these negative emotions in your heart, that's what's going to come out of your mouth. That's what gossip is, right? You could believe all these things, but when you're talking about somebody else behind their back and they're not in the room, what you're hearing, what you're speaking, what the people around you are hearing is the things in your heart. And what fills up your heart is how you carry yourself throughout the day. It's who you hang out with. It's the music you listen to. It's all of these different things that make up who you are inside of you. And that is why, like we talked about last week, it's so important to surround yourself with the right people. Because if you're around people that aren't feeding into the gossip style of things, talking about people behind their back, talking about things that ultimately you shouldn't be saying without that person in the room. You don't need to be around those type of people. You need to be around the type of people that are fueling you, that are motivating you, that are challenging you to become a better person. So the source of your words is your heart. So check on that, man. I cannot stress how important it is to check on your heart. I think this is one of the reasons why we love musicians, songwriters, and artists so much because they are so good with their words and they're being completely vulnerable with those words. And you look at somebody like Jelly Roll, for example, who has an insane testimony of a story where he's been through a million things. He was down a path that he should have never recovered from. And now he sings about that path and his feelings that he had while he was on that bad path. But he also sings about the path of hope, the path of freedom, the path that he's on right now where he's inspiring the world. You look at that guy and you look at his concerts and you got people that are 80 years old crying at his concert, and you got people that are 8 years old crying at that concert. And it's the words, man. The words evoke this emotion in people that they don't have the words for themselves, and they hear it through the artist, through their things that they've gone through. And I think it's one of the reasons what makes music so beautiful. And at Jelly Roll's concert recently, it went viral. There was an 8-year-old that had just lost her mom, and she went to the concert because her mom loved Jelly Roll and loved his songs, and especially the song "I'm Not Okay." The 8-year-old was obsessed with because she was not okay. She was grieving her mom, and Jelly Roll saw the sign, and he gives the girl her moment and give some very powerful, kind words to her. And I've just never seen somebody that come from such a rough place, spend time in jail even, and come out the other side, and through the power of his music, his writing, and all of these things impact so many people. But I'll need to save some of the Jelly Roll stories for another episode because he deserves his own episode 100%. But for now, let me get into who is the greatest example of this and the topic of our main episode today, Frederick Douglass. You guys probably learned about him growing up because he is one of the most famous people to make it out of slavery in the United States. And then he went on to become one of the most powerful people, you could say, in the United States during Abraham Lincoln's presidency. He helped Abraham Lincoln and influenced Abraham Lincoln in his Emancipation Proclamation, in the Civil War. He was a war advisor in the whole thing, and he started out as a slave. And so we are about to get into Frederick Douglass's life. Frederick Douglass was born in 1818, immediately into slavery. He did not have a last name. He didn't have a birthday. He didn't have any rights. He did not have anything. According to society, his life meant nothing. So when Frederick Douglass was 12 years old, this is when the seed got planted for him. This is when he heard some words come off of somebody else's tongue that could have made his life go one of two ways. Because at this time, the enslaved wife of the plantation owner was secretly teaching Frederick Douglass how to read and write. Once the slave owner found that out, he tried to shut it down, and he basically said, if you give the slave an inch, he's going to take a mile, and all of these different horrible things with other words that are not okay and should never be said. But Frederick Douglass heard that at 12 years old, and how did he interpret it? And this is barely anybody has to deal with those types of words being said to them these days. He could have taken this and turned it into hatred for that person, hatred into a whole race of people. But what he heard an opportunity. He saw, man, if I can learn how to read and write, if I can learn how to use my words, if I can learn how to speak, I could get out of slavery and I could actually make a difference. That is where his mind went at 12 years old. So then what happened to him? He thought about this. This is a quote from his book. If learning made you unfit to be a slave, then maybe I was never meant to be one. So even though his learning got shut down, he still had enough baseline, and he taught himself how to read. He was grabbing scraps of newspapers, Bibles, letters, magazine, whatever it was at the time he could get his hands on. He was doing it, and he was trying to learn how to read. And with the overarching theme in his book that he talks about, especially in his early life, he began to believe that his words could change more than just his life. They could change the world. And that is exactly what happened with Frederick Douglass. At age 27 is when he wrote his autobiography. That autobiography went, in the first 5 years, I think it sold over 30,000 copies and made it overseas into Europe, was selling there. Remember, this is in the 1800s. A slave was able to write this book, and it was selling internationally, and it was shaping a nation. And it all started with some negative words that were said to him by a guy that was afraid of what Frederick Douglass could become if he gained this knowledge, learned how to read, learned how to write. And this is what I appreciate most about Frederick Douglass, because he had every right to be bitter towards so many people. But that's the last thing he chose to do, right? He never sugarcoated the truth. He did not let hatred write his story. His greatest resistance wasn't just escaping slavery. It was refusing to become bitter in the face of it. He spoke truth with fire, but never carried any venom. And for that reason, the contrast of Frederick Douglass and the slave owner is all you need to know about words and what they can do. Because the slave owner at that time, he had the power in that society. But in the long term, who had the power? Frederick Douglass. He was the first black man to be nominated as vice president of the United States back in the 1800s. Nobody even knows who that slave owner was that tried to shut it down from the beginning. But Frederick Douglass's words, he never preached hate. He never preached any of these things. And he ended up changing the world. So if he could change the world, coming from his position, we have no reason that we could not change the world either. And it brings me all the way back to the quote from a few episodes ago where it was, there's always going to be somebody out there that's coming from a worse situation than you, but is more successful. And this means the only difference is the work. So put the work in, have the correct attitude. Make sure the words that you are speaking are positive ones. Words, not just empty words, right? Make sure they're ideas. Make sure they have initiative, which actually makes me think of this other quote from Frederick Douglass that is awesome. Let me see if I can find it. I wrote it down. He says, I prayed for 20 years, but I received no answer until I prayed with my legs. So praying, hoping, wishing, it's all great. It can all be a great starting point, but it will never get you to where you're trying to go. Prayer is powerful, 100%. I'm not downplaying prayer at all, but you got to get out there. You will not receive those answers until you start praying with your legs, taking action on these things. So hopefully Frederick Douglass's story, obviously we can get into way more of it. Definitely read his book. I'm going to read his book here soon, do an episode on it. But one of the most inspiring stories of somebody that was able to use his words to change the world. Now, this is something I haven't done before in Make It to Midnight, and that is get into a little bit of the science behind it all, because I'm not, listen, I was a journalism major. I'm not a neuroscientist. I have zero medical knowledge, but luckily I can read. I can read other people's words and they can educate me. And so this is the importance of watering your heart, watering your brain with the proper things, because where you water is where things grow. So if you're watering negative words, you're going to breed negative habits. You're going to breed negative everything in your life. If it's positive, you get the reverse. But this is about neuroplasticity. And this was a study done on London taxi drivers in 2000. London taxi drivers were required to memorize an extremely complex map of the city, and this test is known as the knowledge. Researchers scanned their brains and discovered their hippocampus, aka the brain's navigation center, was physically larger than average. So what does this mean? Oh, and it grew more the longer they drove. So this shows that the brain physically rewires itself based on repeated thought and behavior. That's the definition of neuroplasticity. What you repeat, you rewire, and the brain doesn't care whether it's positive or negative. It just strengthens whatever you keep saying. Pair this with the idea that negative self-talk literally builds negative wiring, and you need new words to build new roads. I think that's powerful because it shows on the negative side, you're rewiring your brain, you're rewiring the inner workings of who you are, and it's going to put out a negative product. But on the positive side, you can literally stop one day and decide to do the opposite, and you will get the opposite reaction. Now, there's another study out there, and this is about belief loops. And it is a famous classroom experiment where teachers told certain students that they were expected to succeed, expected to bloom academically based on test results. But in reality, there was no backing behind this. They just chose people randomly. And so what happened? The students labeled as bloomers actually did significantly better by the end of the year just because the teachers believed they would. We can do that with ourselves, right? We shouldn't need a teacher to tell us. Frederick Douglass didn't need anybody to tell him something positive to go out and do what he did. When you expect something from others or yourself, your behavior subtly changes to make it more likely to happen. Thoughts come beliefs, beliefs shape behavior, behavior produces results, and those results reinforce the belief. That's the belief loop. And that is why self-talk is so important. Remember, you talk to yourself more than anybody talks to you in your whole life. So while it can be a very powerful tool, it can be the exact thing that takes you down. So I'm going to close out this episode. One of the reasons that I'm kind of making this episode a shorter one, I'm not even sure how long I've been going right now, but I'm traveling this week, so I'm not going to have as much time to put out some different content. But this is the metaphor that we're going to end on, that me and ChatGPT try to come up with together. Your mind as a garden, and the words are the seeds. Imagine your mind as a garden. Every word you say, especially to yourself, is a seed. Some seeds are faith, patience, grit, purpose. Others are doubt, shame, and all the negative feelings that you will have. The thing is, your brain doesn't care which kind that you plant. It grows whatever you keep watering. And the more you water one plant, the deeper the roots will grow. Eventually, those beliefs will become your environment. They will become your garden. They will become what you pull from to give out to the world. It will become your norm. You will not even question them. But here's the wild part. Even if your garden does get overrun with the negative thoughts, aka the weeds, all of the bad things that could tear up a garden, right? You're never stuck. You can always pull weeds out. You can always plant new seeds, and your mind will respond. The same way the London taxi driver's brains literally changed the shape, yours will too. That's the repetition. That's the power of repetition. That's the power of self-talk, and that is the power of belief. So that is your episode today. I hope you feel encouraged. I hope you feel inspired from Frederick Douglass's story, especially because, look, he was somebody they said, you're forbidden to read. He was 12 years old. They said, you're not allowed to learn to read or write. And he ended up writing and assisting and advising the documents, the speeches that went on to change the world. You can do it too. You can help someone else do it. And it's small, man, right? Where we talk about words as seeds. Take this week, plant these seeds in other people's lives. There's no need to put a negative seed in someone else's life. Think of you. They are already having the most negative self-talk. They don't need anybody else throwing bad seeds in their garden. Help them water their garden with the proper things. Plant the right seeds in there, and keep trying to help each other make it to midnight. And I'm actually going to leave you guys with one more quote because I saw it just as I was scrolling through some of my notes, and I want to share it with you. It's easier to build strong children than it is to repair a broken man. Let's build up others around us. Let's treat everybody with a childlike heart. And I know I said it before, but let's keep making it to midnight. Thanks for watching this episode. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you comment. Make sure you share it with a friend. Share some quotes with me. Share some stories with me that I can dive into more. And I cannot wait to see you guys next week for episode 18. Appreciate you, and make it to midnight.